Hi guys, how are all of you doing? I hope everyone is staying home and staying safe and doing absolutely amazing. A very warm welcome to the second session of the French Revolution. I know you guys have been eagerly waiting for the session, and here I am with it. Okay, let me quickly introduce myself. I'm Ankana, your master teacher for social sciences at Vedantu. And again, a very warm welcome to the session. Let's quickly get started without any further delay. So we will begin by discussing the homework question from the previous session. So the answer to the question is tile. Okay, the tax was called tile. And people who have answered this the fastest are Wafa Fatima, Nandi Mehta and Amya B. Congrats you guys. I am so proud of you and so glad that you guys are here. Again, Bacha, I quickly want to reiterate that if you want your names here, which I would love to see all of you one by one being here, all you have to do is remember, answer the fastest, not just in the live chat, but in the comment box. Also make sure that you're liking and subscribing the channel and the video. Okay guys, now as I told you, this is the second session. If you have already not watched the first session, make sure that you pause the video here and quickly go back to the first session and watch that first. Otherwise this will not really make a lot of sense to you. Okay, so let's see what are we going to discuss today. So in today's session we'll be talking about conditions of the rest of the France. France becomes a constitutional monarchy. France abolishes monarchy and becomes a republic, and of course the homework question in the end, the most interesting part. So stay tuned till the end because I'm going to come with a very important 1-mark question from today's session. So let's begin. Talking about the condition of the rest of the France. So let me take few seconds and quickly go back to kind of brush up on where we stopped. So we had actually started talking about what was the scenario of the French Revolution, how the society looked like, what were the grievances of the people which finally led to the outbreak of the revolution, what were the certain crises, the climatic conditions, the societal conditions and all of that, that together agitated the people and led to the revolution in them. So we spoke about the outbreak of the revolution, and whatever scenarios that we discussed were majorly in the cities, the main towns and the cities of the country. But then what was happening in the rest of the country, guys? What was happening in the rest of the France? So let's have a look at that. So as I told you, we have mostly discussed about the cities and the towns, but what about the countryside? What about the villages of the country? What about the villages of France? What was happening there? So in villages, the most practiced line of work was actually agriculture. That's a normal thing. Villages, mostly people's life is dependent on agriculture, and so was in France. Now most of them, as they were dependent on agriculture, their livelihood was taken care by that. Okay, was taken care by the agricultural, you can say the cultivated harvest and the products, the production of their harvest. But France, being a cold country, was facing very severe winter. As a result of this, the harvest was not really good. Their production was not up to the mark as they expected for a good return, for a good compensation. On top of this, if we quickly go back to the previous session's discussion and recall that the population of entire France was rapidly increasing. As a result of that, it was also increasing in France. Now, population was increasing, but the food supply was not. On top of that, the bad harvest, the bad weather is leading further to the shortage of food. Now, if supply is less and demand is more, naturally the supply would be less because food is less, but the demand is constantly increasing. What will happen? The prices will go high. And the staple food of France was bread, whose price got raised, spiked up like anything, and resulted into a great pain point for all of the people over there. Now, this has always been a situation that people who are somewhat in power, or the better layer of the society, has always taken advantage of such issues, has always taken advantage of such crisis period, and so was done with the bakers, who at this point were feeling powerful because they were producing the breads, which was the staple food and was in high demand by everybody in the society. People would stand for hours in the queue just to get some amount of bread for their survival. And what were these bakers doing? One, they had definitely raised the price high. Everyone had, because the food was short and the supply was less and the demand was more. But on top of that, they were actually not giving people what they wanted. They were trying to hoard the stock. They would not let the stock out and provide the people whatever they had. They would just try to keep a hold on it, and like keep a limit on it, so that further they could sell it even at a higher price. Now that had agitated the people like anything, and they got very, very angry. And mob's anger is the worst thing to be faced, guys. You never want to be a part of that. You never want to be a target for that. But the bakers became a target of that, as a result of which these guys stormed into the stores. They were like, dude, you're finished now. You cannot do this to us. And these are hungry people who are angry as well. Okay, they are the people who are in a crisis. They're angry, they're hungry, everything. And these guys stormed into the bread shops, and then they just started, you know, picking stuff up from there. They started looting things from there because they were just done with it. And especially the very interesting part that we get to see over here, that these people who were actually storming into the stores were more of the women of the French society, the women of the lower classes, because they were the people who were suffering the most. They anyways had no identity in the society. On top of that, they had to take care of their children, their family. So it was more of them who just stormed into these places and were done with it. And then they started looting whatever was there because they needed food. People who are hungry, what are they going to do if they're not getting to get food? They'll ultimately snatch it away from whoever has it. And that's what these hungry people also started doing. Now, while the king got the message of all of this agitation that was going out in Paris, he obviously couldn't have just stayed silent. He wanted to control it. He wanted to put a stop on it. But his approach was very, very wrong. People are already very sad. On top of that, what the king did was he sent his troops, he sent out his army to control the crowd, which further agitated the people. It got the people even more angry than they were. It was not a very wise step on the part of the king. Now, when has our King Louis XVI been wise? Never, right? And we will see the example of that ahead. And that, I think, has led to his own demise. I mean, like, he called for it. He asked for his own destruction. So now, as I told you, that people got even more agitated because he had sent, and these people are hungry. They're already angry because of the exploitation by the bakers. On top of that, the king is not understanding the problem, the pain, the crisis his citizens are in, and sending troops to control them by violence, by brutality. Not fair. As a result of this, on 14th of July, the agitated crowd stormed and destroyed Bastille. Now, what is Bastille? So Bastille is, guys, actually a symbol of despotic power of the king. Despotic means tyrant power, the autocratic power, okay? This was actually a very big jail where he would put all the people that he was unhappy with. Now, this was a thing that French kings would do, okay? If they're unhappy, they would simply punish the people by putting them into the jail. People who would go against them. And that was a symbol, because anyone who was against the king was put into that jail. So that jail was a symbol of his tyrant, of his autocratic power. And these guys broke that. They destroyed that, which is in a way a symbol of destroying his power of tyranny, of that despotic power that he owned. And now that they were getting a little better by showing that anger out, by getting that anger out, they were just about to calm down, before which they heard a new rumor. Now, before the crowd would have settled, they got unsettled and stirred up again. Now, what was this rumor that unsettled them? So, this rumor was that a band of brigands were coming to destroy their ripe crops. Now, already there is destruction of crops happening because of the weather. The production is already affected. On top of that, they're hungry, they don't have food, and all of this crisis is going on. And they get to know that the big landlords, that the big lords, the nobles, or all these people are actually going to come and destroy whatever ripe crops are left in their places, in their fields. Now that was just it. The already agitated crowd just broke the limits, and they, before being attacked, so now what their approach was, now what they were thinking was, they panicked, okay, and they were also scared because they were in a crisis, guys. They were they were in a situation where they were very helpless. They had nothing. They were in destitute. So as a result of this, what they decided was, before these lords attack us, we should attack them. Before the enemy hits you, you should hit him, so that you are on a stronger front. And the same thing happened with the angry crowd as well. And who were these in this crowd, guys? They were mostly the poor people, the peasants, right? The artisans, all of those people who were suffering already. So the peasants, as a result of this, attacked all those big buildings, all those castles owned by the nobles, by the lords, which they heard are going to destroy their ripe crops, were going to destroy their fields. And not just that, they looted everything that was in their house, because they already have nothing left. They're in a very helpless, in a very scarce, in a situation where they're facing scarcities for their basic survival. If you remember, they were having subsistence crisis. They were having a crisis of survival, and they were struggling even to just stay alive. And at this point, all of the people, everything, the people who are privileged, the king, the nobles, the lords, are making the life of these people even more difficult by doing all of this, by spreading these rumors, by sending the troops, by not giving them the breads. So they decided to just barge into the castles and the houses and the big buildings of all these lords, loot all the grains, destroy everything that is there. And along with this, they also destroyed the records and the documents. Now, what was this records and documents was, if it was related to the feudal system, which was somewhere destroying and letting them free from this system. Now at this point, the people are on the streets everywhere. Everyone, protests are going on. Everyone, people are very agitated and angry and expressing their anger. Now this made Louis XVI, King Louis XVI, realize that it's not going to calm down easily. The people are not going to calm down easily, and it scared him. And he took the easy way out. He realized that in order to put the people, at rest, he will have to listen to their demands. And he finally recognized the National Assembly. If you remember from the previous session that we discussed that the National Assembly was formed, right? This group of people who went to the king with certain demands and were not fulfilled. And when they stormed out of the meeting, they finally formed the National Assembly. But till this point, it was not recognized. It was not some functional body. It was just a body who proclaimed themselves to be something, but they were not really recognized by the government. But after this agitation and everything, which was to abolish also the feudal system, the privileges, which was a symbol of that, he recognized it. Okay, so after the recognition of this National Assembly, came the August Decree 1789. Decree is basically a law. Okay, according to this law, the feudal system and the taxes were abolished. Okay, so all these taxes and all the tortures that were being done to the weaker people of the society, the majorities who were being dominated by the minorities, was abolished. Now something in the favor of the people, right? And people like the people of clergy had to give up their privileges. Now everyone who was the nobles and the clergymen who were having some privileges, what they had right from their birth, now was being abolished. Some fairness in the society, right? Some good coming by the revolution. So they had to give up all their privileges. Everything that they owned was also confiscated. All the lands and everything was taken away from them, and not just from them, even the other nobles, they were also kind of, the privileges were abolished in order to create some sort of equality. Now what happens? So after this, guys, a very interesting thing happened. Even if you remember in the beginning, we discussed that France was in a very bad situation when Louis XVI came into rule, when he was just 20. It was already facing a lot of financial crisis. On top of that, he helped the Americans to get the 13 colonies to get freedom, right? So as a result of this, they were in a debt, and the people were charging high interests on those debts, and it was not able to pay it off. And that was the reason that the taxes were increased on the lower class. Now that these taxes have been resolved, and all those extra wealth that was hoarded by the upper class, the nobles and the clergy, was confiscated, was taken by the government. You can't imagine that the amount of money these guys had stored. Okay, they had all the money which could have solved all of this problem of the country, but it never occurred to anyone. Such was the advantage of the privilege that they had. And once this money and all of that was taken by the government, it even resolved the problem of indebtedness. All the debts were now cleared of 2 million livres. Can you imagine how much money this minority society was having on its own? Now, after all of this, after the National Assembly is recognized, France became a constitutional monarchy. Now, what do we mean by this? So, bachcho, monarchy is actually of two types, okay, absolute and constitutional. What is the difference between two? So, France, let's take example of France only. France earlier was an absolute monarchy, which means an autocratic rule was there. The ruler was solely responsible and authoritative in this scenario and took all the decisions as per his will and whims, which is not the case in constitutional monarchy. In constitutional monarchy, however, there will be a head of the state in the form of a monarch, the ruler from the royal family, but he will not be the sole owner, you could say, the sole ruler or the sole center of authority for the entire country. There would be other bodies who would be helping him out, or who would also be a part of the decision making, and that's what the National Assembly created. If you remember, when National Assembly was formed, their main objective was to limit the power of monarch. That was their objective, that was their purpose of coming into existence, and that is finally they were achieving in 1791. So in 1789, they said that they're going to get started with the constitution that they're going to draft in order to limit the powers of the monarch, which they finally were ready with in 1791. And now they were even recognized by Louis XVI, by the government, by the nation, by the ruler, right? So they implemented this constitution now. Now, as per this constitution, the major change that happened was that the power was now divided. It was not, absolutely centralized just with one person. It was not concentrated in one person, that was the monarch himself. Now it was divided in the legislature, executive and judiciary. Do you guys remember who proposed this? We read about various philosophers, right? And this theory was given in a book by one of great philosophers. What was his name? Can you guys quickly tell me in the comment box? I would love to hear from you people. I would tell you the answer maybe in the next session. Fatafat say, quickly tell me the answer. Who proposed this idea of dividing the government's power into three horizontal, you can say, pillars, which was of legislature, executive and judiciary? Okay guys, now let's have a little more insight into like a little more discussion about the National Assembly. So we know it was formed in 1789, and who formed it? Who were these people who had stormed out from this meeting where they were not given the right to vote, one vote per person. It was given to the three estates, one vote per state, and had declared themselves as the assembly, and now it was even recognized by the king. Now, what was their power and what was their purpose? So we know their purpose was to limit the monarch's, you can say, power. But what was their, but what was their power? What was the power of the National Assembly? It was to make laws along with the king. Now, the king solely was not responsible for this. As per the constitution, they had the power to make the laws now, and they had made certain changes. Okay, so the separation of power, as I told you, was now created among the horizontal pillars of the legislature, judiciary and executive. Now they also came up with this new rule which said that the elections are now going to be happening indirectly by the active citizens. Now this is a new term, active citizens. What do you mean by active citizens? Citizens are citizens, they are people of the country. But in France, it was not the same. Despite of National Assembly being a victim of all those things existing in the society at that time, of all those, you can say, separation, biases and you can say the partiality that was there, being the victim of the privileges by birth, they still did not really resolve the whole society's problem. So now, as per their rule, as per their new laws, the society was divided into two sections of citizens. One was called active, the second was called passive. Now, who were these active citizens? They were only men, guys. Notice these are only men, no women's involvement at all, despite of what they have, what they don't have. Now, only men who were above 25 years of age and were the highest taxpayers, or at least were able to afford the taxes equal to the wages of 3 days of labor, equal to the wage of a 3 days labor, were only permitted or given the title of active citizen. Rest everybody who was paying tax less than that, or was not paying any tax, or the women, were actually the passive citizens who basically had no participation, nothing to do with the formation of the government or with the functioning of the government or the country. So sad, right? I mean, so unfair. But anyways, that was it, how it was. Now, indirect elections were happening. Now, what do we mean by this? So right now what we have, guys, is direct elections. ठीक है बच्चा? So right now whatever we do in India, for example, are direct elections, which means as a citizen I directly elect my representative who is going to represent me in the government, who will be ruling there. But at that time, what was happening? Indirect elections were happening, which means I will elect the person who will elect further the representative who's going to represent my interests in the government. So it was a two-step thing. Okay, so as I told you also, the eligibility for this was going to be a person had to belong to the highest bracket of taxpayers. So in order to be an active citizen, you had to be at least able to pay tax equal to 3 days of labor's wage. But in order to be eligible for elections, you had to be in the highest bracket of the taxpayers. Still, there is a bias based on income, taxes. Not everything has been changed, not everything has been resolved. Now let's talk about this constitution that was created by the National Assembly. So this is the very first page of this constitution. Okay, it says the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen. So sad, it just says man and citizen. It doesn't simply say citizen, which means it's not an inclusive thing. Not the entire society, not all the members of the society has been included, which is a very sad thing, right? Don't you think so? Now anyways, chalo, whatever it is, at least some improvement was there. But what were these improvements? What were the certain new things that they proposed? So they proposed right to life, freedom of speech, freedom of opinion, and equality before law. Now all of these things are very similar, right? I'm like very familiar. I mean, we have heard this. Where have we heard this before? In our fundamental rights. This is a part of our fundamental rights. You can say that this was the very initial draft where it was very, very basic. These are the very basic things of life. And all these things, as per the Constitution of France also, and the National Assembly, was declared to be natural and inalienable rights. So inalienable rights, as I told you, they belonged, which means that this is something that they couldn't have alienated, they couldn't have stopped, they couldn't have left out for the people. It was very compulsory for them. Okay, it was a necessity for them. Not exactly necessity, but it was something that was not dispensable. It was something that couldn't have been avoided by the people. And each and every human that was born over there in the who had taken birth in France would have this as their fundamental right. This was their right and could not be taken away from them. Okay, not bad. However, not everyone is completely, you can say, included, but at least some improvement for the upliftment of the citizens, correct? Now let's talk about France abolishes monarchy and becomes a republic. So right now, what are the changes? So how do we see the changes are happening? France is first monarchy. Okay, it's a monarch state. It's an absolute monarch. From there, it changes to a constitutional monarch where the constitution is also existing. Now, even that, but ultimately it is still a monarchy. The king, the royal family is still there. But now that entire thing is going to be resolved. Okay, that entire thing is going to be abolished and the setup of a republic state is going to be established. Good thing, right? Sounds very positive. So let's see what happens then. So as I told you that the absolute monarchy had now changed into constitutional monarchy. Now Louis XVI was obviously not very happy about this, and he had also realized that the people of France are not going to stay quiet. This thing, whatever the scenario is going on, is going to get only worse day by day. So he started planning his secret negotiations with the King of Prussia. Now the question that arises over here, which I'm sure you guys might also be thinking, is What secret negotiation? I mean, like, why would he be negotiating with somebody else out of the country? One, and what would he negotiate about? Second, why the king of Prussia? I mean, why not he would stay in his own country, or like, why only him and nobody else? So let's talk about that a little more. So why did he start these secret negotiations, and why would anyone else help him out despite of being a different country and the ruler himself and being a monarch himself? So Bacha, at this point what had happened was French Revolution was at its peak. Right, people were just so angry, annoyed, but the strength of it was recognized and acknowledged by all the countries, all the nations in Europe. And they knew that it has just started with France, but it is soon going to spread all over. Okay, it is soon going to rub off on everyone, and one by one everyone is going to start picking up and getting inspired from the French people. So they wanted to suppress it. All the monarchs around France was now very scared and in a panicky state, and they wanted to suppress this, you can say, revolution. So they were ready to help Louis XVI, right? But then why did he go only to King of Prussia? Because out of all these nations surrounding France or in Europe, the King of Prussia at that time was one of the most powerful persons, okay? And that's why he's the one who could have really helped him out. Okay, so as I told you, all the monarchs wanted to suppress French Revolution, and the King of Prussia would have only been the person who could have helped the best in the best manner to the King Louis XVI. That's why he went there. Now, okay, that is fine, but what happened as a result of this? So he was planning on combining with their forces and then suppressing with whatever measures the revolution. But before his plan would have become implemented, or before there's some they would have started with the implementation of their plan, or would have come to a concrete step, the National Assembly got a sense of a secret planning. Okay, they understood that something is going on inside, and they declared war against the two major countries, which was Prussia and Austria. Now Prussia was very powerful, so this makes sense. But why did they select Austria and not all the other nation, or any other nation for that matter? So Prussia was the most powerful one, but Austria was the home of Marie Antoinette. Marie Antoinette, if you remember guys, was the wife of Louis XVI, and the king had to be punished, so his wife's hometown was selected. And they waged a war against these two countries. Now, the war was not just a war about fighting and getting, dominion on the state. No. The war, the nature of the war, the sentiment of the war, people who were fighting this was very, very different. It was a war against the differentiation that existed between the class. It was the war against classism. People were fighting against the kings and the aristocracies that was there all over the Europe. The people who were victim of this aristocracy, of this division of the kings, all of their unfair ill treatment. And that is what the war was against. And thousands of people were getting mobilized. But this was so interesting. Everyone was coming together. I mean, like the way they were getting united and throwing themselves into the war to fight against this you can say just system that used to exist in the society. And at the same time, so the feeling of nationalism was coming among them, right? So they were coming with a lot of symbols that was there to relate to put forward their feeling of this nationalism, of their patriotism. So similarly, there were patriotic songs that were coming up as well, and one such song was Marseillaise. Now, what is Marseilles? Marseilles is actually a place in there which inspired the people to write a song on it, because a lot of people from this place were coming and sacrificing themselves, or were being part of this revolution, were joining the army, were joining the soldiers of the revolution. And this song became so famous that it ultimately became the national anthem of France. It was written by Roger de Lisle. And it was so beautiful, got so popular that it was ultimately declared the national anthem of France. Now, while all of this was going on, obviously there had to be certain groups who would add on to this. That's a given thing, right? Earlier there were secret societies. If people were dominated, then there were certain groups, then there were assemblies, and similarly, clubs, not just one club, but multiple clubs were now being formed. Now, why were these clubs being formed? Because the revolution kind of was over, and the king had somewhat listened to the demands of the people. So right now, let me quickly come back and explain you the scenario of the society in this moment. So the constitution of 1791, although gave a lot of rights and improvised the situation of the society, but it was not really for everyone. It was not for all the segments of the society. Again, the pain of the lower class people still remained, because the rights that was given by this constitution was only for the richer sections, bacha. The biasness, the unjust system was still in existence. If you remember, the voting rights were not given to the people who did not have property. I mean, why would National Assembly still be there then? Although they were limiting the powers of the monarch, but it was not really catering to the demands or the problems of each segment of the society. So as a result of this, a lot of people in Paris were still very sad, were still very happy, and they believed that the revolution should still keep going on in order to achieve the nation state for everybody, in order to achieve equality for everybody altogether. Okay, because right now, because of all of this revolution that was going on, they had become aware of the factor that a country, that a nation, that a place can exist without any one absolute ruler. They had become aware of the power of freedom and liberty, and that is what they wanted for each and every segment of the society. Now, so we are talking right now about the rich people were only being catered by this new constitution, but the people who were not so prosperous, who were not so wealthy, were being left out. So different clubs were being were being formed in order to continue this revolution. Now, who were these? Now, one of the very famous clubs which was formed at this time was the Jacobin Club. Okay, and at the same time, guys, the women were also becoming very active. Okay, they were actively participating in this new revolution that was still going on, because as I told you, not each and every segment of the society was being justified by this new constitution. The women for sure were left. Men, at least few of the men were getting some rights, but none of the women, despite of being any segment of the society, any class of the society, was getting any right. As a result of this, they became very active and they started forming their own clubs. But we will discuss about this in more detail in the next session. Today, let's talk about the Jacobin Club in more detail. Who were they, what were they, and why were they? Okay, so as I told you, like a lot of people who were not so prosperous were left out by this new constitution that was formed. They were not feeling included, but they wanted to continue the revolution in order to be a part, to be an inclusion of this new system, the new change in the administration that was going on. Okay, so what they decided was, now they wanted, and Jacobin club was actually a political club, and they wanted to establish equality among everyone. Now guys, if there is a club, there has to be a leader. I mean, like every group, every club, every movement always has a leader. So who was the leader of this club? It was Maximilien Robespierre. Now, who is Maximilien Robespierre? This person is going to play a very important role ahead once we get to see when a new era starts eventually in next few months and years. So remember this name very carefully. We will come back to him and discuss more about him, and we will also come back to the women's and their clubs and discuss more about their participation in the revolution. But right now, as I told you, let's discuss about this Jacobin Club. Now, what was this club? So this was definitely formed by the less prosperous people of the society, because they were not being catered or included by the new constitution of 1791. Now, this included pretty much everyone of the small scale, like the shopkeepers, artisans, printers, daily wage workers, etc. Now, how were they different from the rest of the people? Definitely, they were not as prosperous, but they also wanted to establish a sense of pride in being less prosperous sector of the society itself. Now, how did they decide to do this? They decided to symbolize this by the way they would dress up. So these guys decided to dress up into striped pants. They would wear a red cap, which was actually a symbol of liberty, freedom. that was so beautifully thought through. They started taking sense of pride in the way, whatever way they would dress up. Now the higher segment of the society, guys, used to dress up in a very fashionable manner. They would be so well dressed, and they would also wear something which kind of distinguished them from the rest of the society, that was known as knee breeches. But these people said that we are not going to follow any of this. We do not want to follow you. We do not want to be a part of your segment or your society. We want to create our own society which should be equally treated like yours. And that's why we are going to have our own identity. We are going to dress up in our own way and not wear any of those knee breeches, which is a symbol of your dressing sense, which is a symbol of your fashion, which is a symbol of your section in the society. Okay, and a result of this, they did not wear the knee breeches like the riches of the society to symbolize their power, and also to show the power, end of power, which was withered by these people, which was wielded by these people, the riches of the society. And as a result of this, these guys were called sans-culottes, which basically literally means without the knee breeches. And that were the people of Jacobin Club. You can see in the picture also how they are dressed up. But again, guys, now what were these club people doing? So in 1792, these guys decided of an uprising. Okay, they decided to come together into a movement, into a revolt, with a large number of Parisians, with a large number of Paris people. Now, as I told you just few minutes back, that the people in Paris were still not very happy. Why? Because of course this new constitution was not catering to everyone, but there was one more very, very basic challenge. But yeah, not everyone is so much into politics and equality and everything. But one thing that is very important for everyone is food. That is something that appeals every segment, every sector, each and every member of the society, irrespective of their caste, irrespective of their class, irrespective of their job, anything else. Food is something that is a basic requirement of each and every person. But the food at this point was still short in supplies, and the prices were still going high, which was creating the problem for all the lower sections of the society. And that's why people in Paris were so unhappy, so unsatisfied, and they came together and started an uprising. Now, as of this uprising, what would they do now? Now, we have seen all these uprisings that has taken place earlier. The bakers were attacked. The lords, the bigger lords, right? They were attacked. Bastille was destroyed. Now, what was going to happen this time? So, the people now this time attacked the palace. Which palace? So what happened? They just woke up in 1792 and they decided to storm the palace. They started walking towards the palace and stormed it. They massacred, they killed all the king's guard and took the king as a hostage. Now imagine how angry they would have been that they have taken the king, the ruler of the France, as their hostage. And this also makes us realize the power that the citizens of any country, any nation carries, and that any ruler should be aware of. Now, once the people come together, no matter how strong, how powerful you are, you're nothing in front of the society. You're nothing in front of the whole mob. So guys, they had basically taken a walk in front. They had basically stormed into the palace of Tuileries, the palace of the King Louis XVI, and took him hostage. Now they had only taken him hostage. They were not going to hurt him as of now. At least not as of now. Maybe later, we don't know what would happen. Okay. So now they had decided, they had come up with certain demands. So what happens to this demand, and what were their demands? So the assembly as a whole, now people had, after taking the king into hostage, the assembly was now actually advocating for imprisonment of the entire royal family, because they had been so unjust towards the entire citizen. They had not really been a good ruler. They had not been in the favor of the citizen of the country. So they were demanding that every one of the royal family should actually be imprisoned. And as a result of this, now because the king has been taken into the hostage, elections were going to be happening again. Elections were held again. Now this time, this was creating a proper equality among people, because everyone above the age of 21, irrespective of their wealth, regardless of what their financial status was allowed to vote. However, women are still not given the rights, but at least all the men were given. At least each person from each household was getting some rights to vote, were getting some rights to be a part of the election. And after this election, obviously there were few people who came together, and naturally a new assembly would be formed, and this new assembly was known as the convention. So new name was given to this new assembly formed by the election, which was done by everyone above the age of 21, all the men, not the women, definitely, was given the name the convention. Guys, it's just sad how women were not given their due respect and space and recognition still in the society. Okay, they were still not being recognized with their full power in the society. In fact, even the Jacobin Club, which was fighting so much for the equality in the society, they themselves were differentiating between you can say the rights of the men and the women. The red cap that the men would wear, which would symbolize freedom, was not allowed for the women to be worn by them, which means they were somewhere not liberated, were not made free, were not set free as such. But we will see how this struggle happens later. But in 1792, we understand that with this election, the monarchy was completely abolished. No absolute, no constitutional, no sort of monarchy was left anymore, and France was declared as a republic. Okay, now that France has become a republic, obviously there is no monarchy. Then what would happen to the monarch? He would also be completely useless, and also because he had been so unjustful towards everyone, the people were so agitated, so irritated, so angry from him, so disappointed by him, that they decided to execute King Louis the 16th. I mean, no matter how bad he was, and the punishment must have been very harsh, but people felt very satisfied by doing this. They were absolutely in support of this, and in fact applauded his execution. So Louis the 16th and Marie Antoinette along with him, the king and the queen, were both sentenced to death by the court on the charge of treason. Now, what do we mean by treason? Bacha, treason is basically betraying your own country and citizens, not being loyal to your own country, and that's something that Louis XVI had actually done, right? He was conspiring against the people of his own nation, despite of having his. So it's said that king is actually like a father, and the citizens of the country are like his children. So he was actually conspiring against his own children by combining his forces with the king of Prussia, and somewhere with Austria also. So on January 21, 1793, he was executed publicly at the palace in front of everyone, in front of the whole crowd. He was executed at the Place de la Concorde. In a public execution, he was finished. He was sentenced to death, both the king and the queen, and it was greatly supported by all the people. Okay. So this was it. Now we see that the assembly was not there. I mean, the assembly was there. Sorry, the constitutional monarchy has been abolished. The king has been executed. Now the state, the nation is going to be without any head or any ruler. So now a new era is going to start. A new reign is going to start, and a very important person is going to come into the picture, which we will discuss in the next session. Let's quickly have a look at the homework question, bacha. This is very important from your examination's perspective. So the question is, the National Assembly completed the draft of the Constitution in 1791, 1790, 1792 or 1793. Make sure you're putting the answer in the comment box, not just in the live chat. And if you think this video helped you, don't forget to hit the like button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, because the moment we come with the next session, you will immediately be notified, and you wouldn't want to miss the next session, right? Because the new reign is going to start. And I will see you then with the new information about the new reign. Until then, you stay home, stay safe, and take care of yourself, guys. Take care of your loved ones. Bye bye. Have a great day ahead. I'll see you very soon.